is that Time Magazine has basically said that we live in the age of what they're called FOMO, F-O-M-O. And what it stands for is the fear of missing out. Because if you look at life, and especially 70% of the millennials, okay, these are the people from, born after 2000 and stuff, called the millennials. 70% of them are on social media a lot. That's where they have everything. Their whole life is on social media. And the other day when Facebook went down, there were some of them that were having anxiety attacks, because it was like, how long is this going to be down? I got to find out who's on right now and all of the other things that are going on. And I don't know if I'm on Facebook, okay, and in my Facebook feed, right after it comes up and tells me, okay, hey, Chuck, blah, 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 it gives me these trending videos. And all these trending videos of all these people doing dances. The one is the Applebee song, and then there's a couple other ones that, I forget now, it's whatever it is, but everybody's trying to do that. And it's like everything is all posted now on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and Splatter and Splash and Splot and whatever else that they've got out there, It's just everybody's got their own platform and they're doing all these things. And what's happening is, all of these people, when you begin to look at it, they're all posting because they're afraid of missing out. Everybody else posting. I've got to post. I've got to just put something out there. And they've got a desire to keep up with everybody, okay? And what's happened is they've overbooked their calendars, they've overspent their money, they've overdrawn their credit, they've overloaded their emotions, they've overloaded their bodies, their days, they've overvalued the approval of people, and as a result, they just feel overstressed. It's like, what am I going to do? They don't sleep, they're on there till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes 4 and 5. And then they go to sleep for about an hour, and then they get up to go to work. And so they look at all these things. And so what I want to do today is I want to talk about moving from being overwhelmed to be overflowing, because there's something totally different. And there are two approaches to life. And you're in one or the other. You're either overwhelmed or you're overflowing. And I'm going to start out by explaining the two differences between these, because it's important that you understand those. Because if you come from the point of being overwhelmed, then what you're going to have is this shortage. It's a shortage mindset, okay? And from this mindset, what's going to happen is I never have enough, and I never will. And so what happens is that leaves you feeling overwhelmed. It's like, I don't have enough time. Got all of these things that I've got to do, all of these things, and they're on my calendar, and I don't have enough time. And even if I have enough time, I don't have enough money to do all of the things, not that I want to do, but even some of the things that I need to do, like laundry. Go to the grocery store. Look at the price of bacon. Bacon it's like $2. It's like 230% higher than it was last year. Okay, it's up to almost $8 a pound. Gasoline a year ago was $1.80. Now it's like $3.60. So I've got that. And now, if it's not enough that you can't buy food to eat and you don't have enough money to get to the store, don't worry about it. You can stay home. And you won't have to worry about eating, because of the amount of money that you're going to have to pay for natural gas to heat your house. It's going up, they're saying, I want to say $200 to $300 a month during the wintertime. So all I can say to y'all is, cuddle up, honey. It's going to be a cold winter because we probably aren't going to have enough money to pay the heat bills. And everybody says, well, don't worry about it. They can't shut it off during the winter. No, they can't. But they can guarantee you that if you don't pay your bill, it won't be turned back on next year. And people say, well, I'll just worry about that later. Okay. It's just a lot of things that are going on. And so what happens is, in the Bible, there are words that are like lacking, wanting, needing. And what happens is people in this kind of mindset, they kind of migrate to those words. And they attach to those words. And that becomes their way of life. As a matter of fact, a good example of that is in the Bible. And we're going to start there this morning. It should be on the screen, 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 42 through 44. And here's what it says. Yeah, I hope you can read it. If you can't, I try my best. But a man brought Elisha, the prophet, some loaves of bread. And remember, there's a famine going on in the land. People don't have anything to eat. Okay? So Elisha said, give it to the people so they can eat. And Elisha's servant said, well, there's not enough here for 100 people. Not enough, for this. So what is it? All of a sudden, he's looking at it from a shortage standpoint. He's got a mentality that says, there's not enough here, Elisha, to feed everybody. And when we start feeding a few people in the front row, those people in the back row are going to start looking, and when it starts getting close to them, and they see that there's not enough food, we're going to have a riot on our hands. Then what are we going to do? And so what did Elisha say? Elisha said, just give it to them, Elisha said. The Lord has promised that there will be more than enough. That's a surplus mindset, not a shortage. And he said, so the servant gave the bread to the people. And sure enough, here's what it said. They ate until they were full. And they still had leftover, just as God had promised. When we started talking about Psalms chapter 23, when we started looking at it, he says, the Lord has given me, everything I need. In the King James Version, it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And the problem is, everybody has used that verse to say, okay, God, I want this. And so therefore, God, since I shall not want because you're my shepherd, then you should give me everything that I want. And the problem is, that was not the interpretation of that word. That word was need. And what he's saying is, I have everything I need, not everything that I want. There's a lot of things that I want. I keep praying to God for a whole lot of things. And he keeps saying to me, you don't need it. And I'm saying, yeah, but you got to help me here. Help me understand what's the difference between the need and the want. Because if you're asking me to do this, then I need this in order to do that. And he says, no, you don't. He says, all you need to do is do what I'm telling you to do, and I will provide the mechanisms to do what it is that I'm telling you to do. All I want you to do is be available and do it. But Lord, you don't understand. That takes this, or that takes that. He says, I understand. I understand totally what it takes. You're not smarter than me, Chuck. I think I created you. I think I'm smarter than you. I think, as a matter of fact, I've been around a little bit longer than you have. So I think I've handled situations like this before, even of greater magnitude. And so you just chill out for a while. And so I'll hang out for a little while, and I'll say, okay, Lord, I'm back again. You're still telling me to do the same thing, and I'm still not seeing anything. And he says, it's coming. And I keep saying, when? And he says, in a minute. And I said, okay, this is not fair. Your minutes are a different time frame than my minute. By the time we get around to your minute, I'm gone. He says, could be. He says, so don't worry about it. I told you, I got it handled. And if it isn't through you, it'll be through someone else. So you just do what I told you to do and get on out there and just do it. And I just got to say, okay, Lord, you just keep giving me the overflow because this is just awesome. So what happens is the reason that we have this shortfall mindset is what we look at is at the resources. And we've got limited resources. This church has limited resources. There's a lot of things. Somebody says, well, why can't we do that? Well, the reason we can't do that is because we don't have the resources to do that. You hear people all the time says, why don't you have a children's program like Solid Rock? Because Solid Rock's got more resources. Solid Rock takes up probably more money in a week than we take up in a year sometimes. So they've got the resources to do those things. And God hasn't called us to do like Solid Rock. He's called us to do like Calvary. That's what he wants us to do. And the resources, some people come in here and they'll say, how in the world do you all do this stuff? And you know what I tell them? Resources. It's called networking. God brings the right people at the right time to do the right thing. And you just stand back and you just wonder, how in the world? God, you're amazing. So I don't know about you, but I just feel so overwhelmed with all of the things that are going on in my life. A year ago, my wife and I were in a car wreck. She's still showing signs of that. It didn't bother me at all, and I was the one that was driving, but it just so happened that it's there. And so it's like, okay, and it's, she can't bend over. If she bends over, she gets dizzy, she falls. So therefore, it's like, okay, who does the laundry? Well, I do the laundry, because she can't bend over. She can't pick up the laundry to put it into there. And so it's like that. It's something falls to the ground, and it's like she can't pick it up, And sometimes people say, well, it's like taking care of a kid. No, it's taking care of a wife. It's taking care of somebody that you love, somebody that's been there for 50, almost 50 years, taking care of you, and it just overwhelms. Coming to a church, and still pastoring and doing all of those things. And some people at my age are already looking at retiring. I'm looking at retiring too. I'm going home. That's my retirement. I'm out. When God checks the time clock and says, okay, time to punch out, I'm gone. And I'll retire at that point in time. And if I'm 95, I hope I'm still got a little bit of mind left. I've only got a little left right now, so just hope I got a little bit more that's still there and it still hangs on to be able to do these things. And so what happens is that we get into this mindset, and what we do is we run this, what is called a shortage lifestyle. And so what happens is we think that life is like a picture. If in my life, I remember when you went to school and you got school pictures, okay, and they gave you these sheets of pictures. One was a big 8 by 10, I think is what it was, wasn't it? It was an 8 by 10, and then I think you had a couple of 5 by 6s, that was in there. So one would go to the parents, the others would go to the grandparents, and then you had these little pictures that you could pass out to your friends and put in a wallet or whatever else. Some people, their life is like those pictures. They're like the little pictures that you put in the wallet. That's what they think, that's their life. Other people think, well, no, their life is a little bit bigger. It's like a 5 by 6. And other people think, my life is pretty cool. It's like an 8 by 10. Can I tell you something? My life is a mural. It is awesome, just the things that God does. And it's just like a whole collage that you could just fill up with all of the things that God does. And you can't contain it if you were to take and put it all on there. And so what happens is, if we walk around with just this wallet, we're walking around with these little small pieces. And what happens is, when we begin to look at this, we begin to start developing things like envy. Man, they got a new car. I'm driving around this clunker. I'm driving around two 2005 cars, both Hondas. One a CRV, another one is a Civic. Both of them have 300. Well, one has 300,000, the other one's close to 300,000, and they're nicked up. My Civic it got hit by a sand coming off the truck, and the paint's all crumbled and messed up and everything. It doesn't look good, but it gets me to where I want to go. And then I'm sitting there at the red light in my little Civic that's all banged up with 300,000 miles, and I look, and there's this person sitting next to me with this big, huge Cadillac. And the other day I'm driving by the car dealer, and there's a truck. And I looked at that and I thought, man, I would really love to have a truck. Until I saw the price tag on that truck. $102,995. And I thought, if I buy that truck, I got to sell my house. And I'm going to live in the truck. And that's sure cramped styles. My first house I bought in 1972, I was in the service. My first house I bought was $18,000. I ended up selling that house. I never made one payment on the house. Okay, always rented it out. I was in the service. So my father-in-law handled it for me. I never made one payment. I rented it out the whole time. I came back. I had enough money not to make any payments for a while as we got set up and everything. And I ended up selling that house from 1983. I ended up selling that house for $46,000. And then it's gone crazy from there. Sometimes I wish I had my $18,000 house back. It would have been fine. I could have done that. But this is what happens. So anyway, so what do? We start become envy, jealous, resent, we worry, we get insecure, and we have all these things. But here's the mindset that God also gives us, and it's called a surplus mindset. And the surplus mindset comes like this. God has more than I'll ever need. Who's providing for me? Not me, him. And so what do? I don't know about y'all, but have you ever gone to God's shopping place? Let's say God's got this store, and you want to go to the store and get a loaf of bread. Do you think you'll ever find the shelves empty there? Or do you think you'll always find that loaf of bread? And more. And the reason is this. God's got his own supply chain. He's not depending on anybody else. He's got his own supply chain to provide just exactly what it is that we need. And so, if I understand that God has a surplus, then I should never be concerned about anything that I need. Because the very beginning says, I have everything that I need. And so what we need to understand is this. Look at the person next to you or in close proximity to you. Now, have you ever thought of just looking over at that person and saying, I need you to stop breathing for a minute because you're taking my air. And if you keep breathing, I'm going to run out of air. you're basically just sucking all the oxygen out of this. Have you ever done that? Have you ever worried about or been concerned about being in a place and I need to tell everybody to stop breathing because they're sucking all my air? Besides Linda. The rest of us are okay. You know, that's why we put her up there, because all the hot air goes to there. So anyway, if we're not concerned about air, which is being provided by who? God. So if God keeps producing air for all of us, then don't you think we ought to be not concerned about anything else? But there is always a solution to that. If we would shut down the Congress, the Capitol, and the White House, and all of that, we would have a surplus of air. Okay? Because we could take all of the money that they're making, and we could go to all of the filling stations and put in our credit cards, and now costs us $1.50 to get air for your tire. Has to be the most idiotic thing I ever heard in my life. You know, why do I need to pay $1 or something to get my air in my tire? But anyway, it's Washington, who cares? So Psalms chapter 23, we talked about it. And we got to this point in the verse where it says that you fill my cup to overflowing. Now, the International Children's Bible says, you give me more than I need. The NIV says that my cup overflows. And again, if you grew up with the old King James and you memorized it, it is my cup runneth over. And what he's talking about here is an overflowing life, okay? Rather than an overwhelmed life, it's an overflowing. So let's talk about this. When we talk about my cup runneth over, what are we talking about there? It's my life. When David is saying my cup runneth over, he's talking about my life. Remember, he said, he gives me everything I need, so I don't want anything. So, if my cup is my life, and David is saying that my cup runneth over, then what he says is that my life is overwhelming. Or not, it's overflowing, not overwhelming, okay? It's overflowing. I'm not overwhelmed because I don't have enough energy, okay? I'll be 68 in January. There are some things in the last year I have learned that I cannot do that I could do the year before. And some things the year before. And a lot of things that I can't do now that I did when I was a kid. So I understand there are certain things in life I can't do. And so I can get overwhelmed by that. Saying they don't have the energy. I don't have this. I don't have that. I don't. But then I come to the point of realizing, hold on a minute. I'm 68 years old. I can get around. I still have a little bit of brain left. I still got movement. And I can look at it and think, you know what? I am blessed to be able to do the things that I can do. Not overwhelmed by the things that I can't do. That's why you have children when you get older. So for the things that you cannot do, you get them to come in and do it. Okay? It's called bake them a meal. And say, hey, I need you to come over and spend some time with me. And they come over to spend time with you and you say, oh, by the way, I need you to move this for me before you go. Hey, it isn't slave labor because I'm paying them for it. Okay, but in John chapter 7, in verse 37 and 38, This is 2,000 years after David. It says this, on the last day of the festival, okay? And the last day of the festival is the most important day, okay? Remember the carnivals? You'd always go, and everybody likes to go to the first day of the carnival. I want to get there the first day, and everybody gets there. No, the best day of the carnival is the last day. Okay, best day. They save everything for the last. And so what happens is, he says this, Jesus stood up and shouted to the crowds. Okay, now you got to understand something. Where he is at, there's probably about 50,000 people in this crowd. And Jesus is shouting. And what does he say? If you are thirsty, come to me. And everybody starts looking around. What's he talking about? If you're thirsty, come to me. He says, everyone who really believes in me will have rivers of living water flowing out of their lives. So we understand, well, what's he talking about? David says, my cup runneth over. And so what Jesus is saying to us is this, if you will believe in me, your life will be just so overflowing. You can't contain it. And you say, well, I'll get a bigger cup. No, he doesn't want you to get a bigger cup. Okay? He wants you to understand, he's given you the cup that he's given you. And it's going to overflow. And then we're going to talk about what he wants you to do with the overflow. Because what a lot of people do is God just blesses them, and they look at it and they say, oh, God, thank you so much, and they keep it. And it's there. And so what we need to understand is this. Now, the Greek word, when he starts talking about here, he says, I'm going to give you this living water. You'll have rivers of living water flowing out of their lives. The word that he uses there of lives is a Greek word or Hebrew word. A Greek word that is called pisto, and I'll spell it for Jim. It's Pisteuo, and it means more than having a head knowledge. And like, I believe in the Son of God. Okay? Yeah, you could say I believe in the Son of God, but what he's talking about is a head knowledge. It's more than that. Because when we talk about believing in God, it's more than a head knowledge, it's a heart knowledge. It's a change of who you are. And it means to trust in. We talked about this. It means to trust, to cling to, rely on, depend on. He says, if you really, really depend on me, your life's not going to be overwhelmed. Your life's going to be overflowing. So I say to you this, if you feel that your life is overwhelming, then the possibility is this. You've got a head knowledge that hasn't connected to your heart knowledge yet. And you're not realizing that God has given you an overflowing life, and you're just overwhelmed. Because God, ladies and gentlemen, contrary to popular belief, God doesn't run out of supplies. He doesn't. And so when we talk about this, we look at the things, and when we begin to understand these things, it really will change your life. In Isaiah chapter 48, verses 17 and 18, God says this, I am the holy God who rescues you. For your own good, I teach you, and I lead you along the right path. He says, for your own good. For your own good, I teach you. I don't do this to make your life tough or rough. I do this to teach you. My mom and dad, God love them. They would do things, and they say, I want to teach you this. And there were some of the things that they were teaching us that was really hard. And sometimes we would think, well, you're doing this to make my life rough. For instance, you turn 16, or even before 16, you get a curfew. And it's like, well, hold on a minute. Last week you didn't tell me I had to be in before 11. Yeah, but I know last week where you were going to be. Last week you were going to be right down the street or in the alley, and I could just reach out the back door and holler for you, and you would be there. Now you're going out with your friends. And I know where you tell me that you're going, but I'm not so sure that you're always going to go where you tell me that you're going. And you say, well, how do you know that? Duh, I was a kid once. You know? And I think, man, you're making my life rough. How can... We shared this. Diana's parents made my life miserable. They didn't like me, okay? Because I don't know what it was about me that they didn't like. I was a nice guy, very respectful of everybody. I was a clown, a joke, you know, but they just didn't like me. There was something they didn't like about me, you know, and I wasn't good enough for their daughter. And so we were in love, and we wanted to go out. And so they trusted her best friend. So her best friend would pick her up at her house, and then I would pick up his girlfriend at her house. We would meet somewhere, exchange dates. We would go on a date. I know everybody thinking, and you're a pastor? Yeah, I was also 16 one time too. It was last week, I think. And so we would exchange, and then we would go on our dates, and then we would come back and meet there. Well, long story short, I got a flat tire. And she had to be home at a certain time. We don't have cell phones. It's trying to find some place close that you could call and say, hey, can you come get me? You talk about overwhelmed. It was not an overflowing moment. But I say this to say this. But God who rescues you for your own good, I teach you and I lead you along the right path. We may not like what he's teaching us, but he's doing it because he wants us to learn. Because why? The path that you're getting into is rough, and you've got to be tough, or else it's going to overwhelm you instead of overflowing you. So, there are some times God is trying to ask you to do some things. He's saying, for instance, I want you to treat your body the way you should treat your body. And sometimes we don't do that. There are times that God tells you to slow down. And we just keep going. I've got to get that next promotion. I've got to get that next check. I've got to get that next part of thing of whatever that I want. And so what do we end up doing? We end up with heart attacks. We end up with stress. We end up with anxiety. And a lot of that ends up with lasting effects on our lives. And God's just saying, hold on a minute. I've got this. I've got this. And so when we begin to look at what Jesus is telling us, it is this. He's telling us that you've got to do it this way, okay? And if I want to do it that way, God keeps trying to say, hold on a minute. Who knows best here? He says, I do, okay? And so what's got to happen is, if I want to live an overflowing life, I've got to stay connected to God. Because once I get disconnected with him, my life is going to start getting overwhelmed. Okay? So in John chapter 15, verses 7 through 11, look at what he says. Okay? If you stay connected to me and my words remain in you, you may ask any request you like, and it will be granted. If you stay connected to me and my words remain in you, you may ask any request you like, and it will be granted. You know what that is? That's a promise. That's a promise. If you'll do this, this is what I'll give you, what you granted. So what did he go on to say? He says, my true disciples produce much fruit. This brings glory to my Father. So stay connected to my love. He says, you stay connected to my love when you obey me. And I told you this so that you will be filled with my joy. And what does he say? Yes, your cup of joy will overflow. You know why our cup is half full or empty? Because we're not doing what it is that he's asking us to do. We don't even know what his word is. We're not even connected. When was the last time, and I'm not talking about picking up the Bible and doing the check mark that said, I read John chapter 11. And tomorrow picking up the next check mark and saying, I read John chapter 12. And just keep going every day reading another chapter, and putting a check mark in it. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not connected to God's word. Anybody can put a check mark that they read a chapter in the Bible. If you could teach a monkey to read, a monkey could put a check mark in there. But a monkey can't understand and comprehend the Word of God. A lost person can read the Scriptures but not comprehend what the Word says because they need enlightenment, and they don't have enlightenment. They may understand the English grammar, they may understand the context of the Word, but they don't understand the Word. Because you've got to have the Holy Spirit to bring enlightenment on that. And this is why he says, my true disciples produce much fruit. This is where he's saying, I want you to question, what is your motive? If you're overwhelmed, maybe this is why. If you've never felt overflowing, maybe this is why. David, you look at his life. His life was not something that you would really want to put on a Christian hero book. Okay? But God does. God says he's a man after my own heart. And you look at his life was a mess. His home life was a mess. His children were a mess. And you think, okay, so I didn't do any of that stuff. So why is my life a mess and his wasn't? Or you're telling me that he was a man after your own heart, and I think I'm doing everything right, and you look at this and everything's falling apart. So did David's. But the thing of it was, David always knew who was there. And David would repent of what he was doing. Okay? And so he says, listen, if you let my words remain in you, you may ask any request that you like, and it will be granted. And so, in actuality, can I tell you this? I kid around with people a lot. And I got to stop doing this sometimes because some people don't think it's funny, and it's probably not. It's like they're a new visitor, and they say, okay, what would you like from me? And I'll say, a blank check, just sign it. And they look at you like, well, this will bounce all the way to the check, to the bank if you get it. How would you like to get a blank check from God? He signs it. And he says, you fill in what you want. As a matter of fact, how about if I give you an unlimited supply of those checks? And you can cash them in at the bank of heaven anytime you want to. If my words remain in you and you do my will, I will give you this blank checks. That's his promise. Now, I'm not telling you you're going to get everything you want, but I'll guarantee you that if you fill in that amount of what it is you need, and you are his disciple, and his words are in you, and you are following and doing exactly what he's doing, and you're producing fruit, I'll guarantee you that you'll find out that you'll get more than you ever dreamed. How do I stay connected to Jesus every day? John chapter 15, verse number 5 says this: I am the vine, you are the branches. If you stay connected to me, you'll produce a lot of fruit, but you cannot do anything without me. Did you ever go out and into somebody's, we used to do this all the time when we were kids. Did you ever go out into someone's grape vineyards and cut some grapes off? You never did that? Okay, go to Kroger's, okay? Whatever. Just go to Kroger and buy you some grapes and just pretend you stole them. They're off of somebody's. But if you let those grapes sit there, what's going to happen to them? They're going to shrivel up and die, right? Why? They're going to shrivel up and die because they're not connected to the vine anymore. Someone cut that off. And that's what God's saying. He's saying, listen. He says, I am the vine, and you are the branches. And if you stay connected to me, you're going to grow the biggest bunches of grapes or disciples that will ever happen. And he says, but you can't do anything without me. Once you cut that umbilical cord from God, you can't do anything without him. It's gone. You're going to shrivel up and die. He's saying, but if you'll stay there, he says, the reason that we get overwhelmed in life, ladies and gentlemen, is we disconnect the cord. We begin to start snipping around. And God's saying, don't. You're going to hurt yourself. And we need to understand that I've got to stay connected. Number 2, and this is most important, stop complaining and start being grateful. There's the old saying, I complained about all of the pain in my toe until I ran into someone who had no foot. I complained about the pain in my eyes until I ran into the person who couldn't see. There are so many times that, can I say something to you? And this isn't in the Bible, but science. Science has proven that if you go around griping, complaining all the time, it will decrease your health. Now, let me share with you why, okay? When you are thankful or grateful, it produces a thing called serotonin in your brain. We'll give you a health lesson that I've learned. It also produces another thing called dopamine in your brain. And it produces oxytocin, okay, in your brain. Don't confuse this. This is not Oxycontin. Okay? This is oxytocin, T-O-C-I-N. Okay? Oxytocin is a feel-good hormone. Okay? We got kids? Yeah. Okay. Sex life. When a husband and a wife makes love, it releases oxytocin in both of their lives. Okay? When a mother nurses her baby, it releases oxytocin in both the mom and the infant. Studies have shown that if you take and pet a dog for 30 minutes, your dog will release oxytocin. It will release oxytocin into the dog's brain and also into your brain. So now you know why it kind of feels good after a while just sitting there petting this animal, okay? So, a lot of like Oxycontin, okay? But he's not talking about that. He's talking about Oxycontin. He's not talking about that. He's talking about oxytocin, okay? And what happens is you and I want that chemical in our life. We want to feel good. So if you want the feel-good drug, you got to quit griping and grumbling. Quit complaining. Because all you're doing is releasing the other stuff that's not helping you at all. God has produced us and created us for a very specific reason with the serotonin and the dopamine in our brains, and also working with the oxytocin, so that what happens is we have this happiness. It doesn't mean that everything's going right, but it means that we're okay. We're not getting anxiety. We're not getting depressed. We're okay. We're doing this, and this is what he wants, okay? So one of the keys is that if you want this produced for peace and happiness and chemicals, the dopamine, the serotonin, and the toxin, this, you know when this happens? There is one time that you will get, your brain will produce dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. It is when you feel grateful. When you are grateful for something, your brain produces all three of those at one time. And they interact. And you get this peace about you. And this is why, instead of complaining about everything that's going on around in our life, we ought to be grateful to God that we're even living. And sometimes I know we want to say, yes, but you don't understand. I would rather get out of this mess and go home. I would too. Okay? But it ain't time yet. And so, God, you've got me here for a reason. So, God, help me find out what that reason is today, that you are leaving me here today because there's somebody you want me to talk to. There's somebody that you want me to meet. There's a word that you want me to deliver. And God, I am so grateful for you allowing me this time to do this. And that's why I tell you, it is this. Philippians says this, in everything you do, stay away from complaining and arguing. So many times we feel like this. And then Colossians chapter 2 verse 7 says this, let your lives overflow with thanksgiving for all God has done. Okay? Number 3, we need to stop comparing and start being content. Okay? This is, I'll stop and finish the rest of it next week. No, I won't. I'll just continue. That's what I can do. I don't have to stop and do anything. But I want to finish with this, because here's the news has been making Facebook, which owns TikTok. Is it TikTok that they own? Or is it Instagram? Is it TikTok? Okay. Because if you've never been on TikTok, it's okay. You can stay off of it because a lot of it is not good. I'm serious. A lot of TikTok is no good. Okay, and here's why. Because here's what's happened. If you go out there and you look, there will be a lot of scantily dressed females. And they aren't 30 and 40. They're 12 and 13. Trying to imitate someone else. Because my friend posted something on TikTok and they got 20,000 viewers. So I've got to do something on TikTok where I'll get more than 20,000 viewers. And they start competing with each other. And who can do this or that? And what's happened is, if you look, and the news came out, and this is the one thing that is happening more and more, is kids, we have started making it a land of competition. And it wasn't TikTok that did that. It was parents. I decided when Johnny was born that Johnny was going to be a baseball player. And so what I did from the moment that Johnny was able to, I put a baseball bat in his hand. And I would always work on his hand-eye coordination to make him the best. Then as Johnny began to grow, I made sure that Johnny got into every baseball program that I could get him into. Every weekend, Johnny was out there playing to be a competition and playing to be the best. Johnny never really got to socialize with much of anybody because he was always competing, even with the people that was on his team, because his parents wanted him to be the best. Johnny grew up that way. Johnny goes to school. Johnny really doesn't have time for much of anything because all of Johnny's time is spent learning baseball. Baseball used to only be played from February, March to October, except for Johnny. Johnny now plays from January the 1st through December the 31st. Johnny's parents are always traveling, never at home. They're never home for the holidays because every holiday there's a tournament somewhere. And so Johnny and his parents are either flying or driving, going to Florida, Texas, California, someplace warm from Ohio. Johnny grows up, and he's always been taught he's the best until he runs into somebody else that's better. And then Johnny has a problem because now Johnny's being compared against somebody else. And Johnny can't handle that. And this is the problem. None of us are the best. Only Jesus is. Only him. And all of us are going to fall short. And may I say this to you? At the end of the life, God is not going to compare me against you or you against me. All God's going to do is compare me against myself. and say, this is what I gave you the capability to do. This is what I asked you to do. And this is where you failed. He didn't ask you to get up here and preach. He didn't ask you to get up and teach. He just asked you to be willing to whatever it was that he wants you to do. And that's what he's going to judge us on. Well, what's happening is our kids are looking for the glamour. Look at all these reality shows, The Voice, America's Got Talent, The Masked Singer, Tutu Goes to wherever, you know. It's everything. Everything's being compared against each other. And God's saying, no. I'm not asking you to be compared against how much somebody has and how much you don't have. He's saying, your cup is overflowing. Shouldn't you be grateful for that? And we're saying, I'm not grateful. God, I want more. And he's saying, you know what? I will tell you next week what he says. And you'll find out why a lot of times you don't have any more. I shared with you last week the story of Dave Green and Hobby Lobby. The guy started out selling stuff out of a trunk of his car. And the guy is a multimillionaire today. Because why? It wasn't racking up how much I could make. It was racking up how much I could give away and whose lives I could change. My question to you this morning is this: are you living a life of overwhelming or overflowing? Because if you're overwhelmed in life, ladies and gentlemen, you're hurting. You're hurting. I guarantee you, you're hurting. But if you're living a life out of overflowing, you're hurting. But you know how to handle it. Because the source of where you go to and who's got it.